births like these, actually you could have a normal, what from the outside looks like a normal birth, and you can have wounds that are related to it that take years and years to really resolve and work through. And when I say birth and becoming a mom is one of the most transformational things that you can do in your life, it's not just labor and delivery. Sometimes you arrive on the other side of that doorway years and years later after you've gone through the healing work that you need to, that resulted from a challenging labor.
Welcome to the Conscious Broadcast. I'm Danielle Kane, and I am so excited to have two of my favorite friends meeting with me today for our first episode. And before we get started, I just want to thank you for tuning in. And please don't forget to like and subscribe to the Conscious Broadcast. And hopefully maybe we'll have you on as well to hear your story. So the purpose of this broadcast is to share a story that has impacted us in some way. And today, I know it's going to affect a lot of different people in their lives with the topic that we're talking about. So the purpose of this is to give a little bit of an insight on something or be able to heal from a particular event, maybe even manifest something from it as well. So we want to take this time to share these stories and so that we can relate and connect with one another. So I'm going to start with an introduction of Laura. Now, Laura has had over 11 years experience in Chinese medicine and as a medical intuitive. She works as a practitioner in the areas of fertility, labor and delivery, postpartum, and pregnancy, which will be very relevant for today's topic. And we have Heather, who is our other guest. Welcome. And she will be sharing her story on her pregnancy and delivery, which was a C-section. And it was a very difficult birthing process. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and how it still affected her now, 13 years later. And so that's how Laura and Heather kind of connected and worked together with this really profound transformation that we're all very excited to hear about. So with that said, I actually want to go to Laura now and kind of get a little bit of an idea about how you got started with your practice. So why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Well, I think every one of us who's in alternative medicine has some sort of story.
Mhm.
But to me, in my recent spiritual work, like these past stories we have are not as relevant to me as they used to be. I think that what I can impart is that since I was a young girl, I have been really fascinated and in love with the mystical experience and what happens to us and why we get to a certain place where we experience the awesomeness of life. And through that, I was a religious studies major. So I studied religion and philosophy and all these things. And somehow naturally that went into Chinese medicine.
Mhm. Did you kind of already feel like there was a knowing there? I mean, you didn't seem like you went off the beaten path and like went into like retail or something. I mean, did you kind of always stay in this direction?
No, I mean, I was pre-med when I went into school. So this is what's funny is there's pivot points in your life where I think normally I would have let the responsibility of the story of what you're supposed to do influence me. Um, when I was younger, I was highly influential, like influenced in that way. But for some reason, I had this moment in undergrad where I said, nope, I'm going to be a religious studies major. Like, the most pointless, let's all agree, bachelor's degree that you could get without going on to grad school. So it was like, granted, I was gonna go to grad school,
Right,
but
right.
but to me, that degree is the most beautiful way to relate to people. You know, my first question when I work with people is like, "What's your spiritual practice? What do you do?" You know, "How do you connect with the unseen?" And Chinese medicine, one, it helped me physically through things that were going on, and funny enough, it didn't require organic chemistry. So naturopathic school required organic chemistry, Chinese medicine school did not. It really was in many ways as simple as a very practical thing of I didn't want to take organic chemistry.
Yeah.
Um,
Just like I didn't want to take calculus. I feel you.
right. So it's these little things that add up to something that is incredible. And I think, Chinese medicine school has this underpinning Taoist philosophy at play. It's a different way of looking at the human body. It's completely different. It's not like Western medicine at all. And once you step into that lineage, once you are part of it, you do have knowing because you're in a tradition that once you tap into it, you can tap into all of it.
And so
I
you kind of started with the acupuncture, would you say? Or was there something before that?
I was a herbalist. I am an
Was
herbalist before that, and then I did acupuncture, and that's Chinese medicine school. I honestly nowadays say that the needles are an afterthought. It's about the conversation and the energy work and the unraveling that we're doing, and then the needles lock it in.
And then
So,
how did the birthing center and that
oh
role tie in?
yeah, so like 5 years ago, my sisters in spirit, KO, who's a naturopath midwife, and Vivian, who's a midwife, we bought a building and we
Mm.
converted it to a birth center. And I had been specializing in birth for a while and women's health, fertility, just because it's this profound opportunity for transformation. It's like a built-in doorway to do these really crazy things to our lives. I think that we in modern life are missing these rituals, these passages that we don't have anymore. But you can't avoid giving birth when you're a woman for the most part, and you have children. So you have to have that rite of passage. And it's this natural, beautiful pivot point of transformation. And me being me, who loves transformation and spiritual work, is like, oh, this is the place for me. So I have always been drawn to it. Since I was a little girl, I've been that way. I'm one of those weird people who, like, always talked about my period 100% openly, and,
And how much you loved it?
how much I loved it, how much I loved it, how it was totally normal, how it
It
was
was
like
your BFF?
moon.
I call mine my friend, so you
That's
know.
right. It's my moon time. Guess what, everyone? Look, listen, I started my moon time the same hour that I gave birth to my daughter 8 years ago this morning. I
Wow.
woke up at 3:30 and was like, "There it is." This is the
That's
same hour I
amazing.
gave birth to my daughter 8 years ago.
Wow.
It was awesome. It was I so the it's just those things, like, I'm like, "That's amazing."
Laura, coming from this perspective, and Heather, we're going to get into your story in a minute because obviously you had a C-section, but like I was being pregnant, I was just like, we're going to have a baby. And then I didn't really know what that was. I didn't really wasn't quite tapped in to where I am now. It's like I look at, home births and that was like very foreign to me. Whereas I started getting into meeting people as I was pregnant, I was like questioning the idea, but I still didn't have that friend like you. I wish I had that would have given me the confidence like you could do this. But I ended up having a natural birth, which was kind of a decision of mine, but really my husband's too, which I don't regret having. I was so lucky, but it's really nice because I think many of our guests will have maybe explored, home births or
Mhm.
birthing center, but many people unfortunately had emergencies and or just typically went like we think we know what we go to the OB and we go through the whole process that they put you through. So it's really cool to hear your story and the side that it is because I think things are changing drastically how we approach, birthing and things like that. So thank you.
It's definitely changing quite a bit. Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome. All right, Heather, let's hear a little bit about you and how your beautiful daughter came in the world. So
Okay.
let's go ahead and share it with us.
All right. So I was 21 when I found out I was pregnant. Um, I was about 12 weeks along already. Um, I remember feeling like I had the stomach flu a lot, and I would just take the Pepto. So it could have caused what she was born with. I don't know. But
Was this their first
anyway,
trimester? You were feeling really lousy?
yes, I was so sick. Ugh, man. Um, I couldn't keep anything down.
Oh,
Nothing. Pretty much the whole pregnancy, really.
so even
Um,
after the first trimester, you found that you still were getting sick.
yep, yep. So I believe 14 weeks, I went into the doctor to have blood work done. They do it for every pregnancy. They run a panel,
Mhm.
and what they found was something came up, a marker came up for spina bifida.
Mm.
And so my doctor's like, well, we need to you need to go to Omaha and have a really good ultrasound because the town I lived in did not have that technology. So at 14 weeks, I got told that my baby might have spina bifida.
Okay.
And it was really hard.
Yeah.
I remember calling my mom after the doctor and be like, Mom, this is going on. I don't know how I'm going to get to Omaha because at this time I didn't have a vehicle of my own. And of course, my mom, well, we'll figure it out. We'll get you there. But we went there and did the ultrasound, and they found out it wasn't spina bifida, thankfully,
Mhm.
but she had what was called gastroschisis.
And what's that?
So gastroschisis is a abdominal wall defect. So basically, when a baby's developing in the womb, their organs are actually formed on the outside,
Mhm.
and then they go back into the body, and then they form the stomach wall. Well, unfortunately, my daughter did not form that stomach wall. And
Okay.
so almost all of her organs were on the outside of her stomach. And so that made it risky pregnancy because the amniotic fluid actually will deteriorate the organs. The one good thing I always say about this is I got an ultrasound every week.
Yeah. So
So
there
I
was
got
that reassurance that things were going okay. The baby's
yes.
heartbeat was there,
Yep. I had to go, especially towards the last trimester. I went 3 times a week to the OB, and I sit on a heartbeat monitor for an hour. And then after that, they took me into the ultrasound room and they checked her out and seeing that her organs were there and stuff, which is crazy because they told me she was a boy for the longest time. I had so many
Really?
ultrasounds. I had so many ultrasounds. They're like, yeah, we're pretty sure she's a boy and stuff. And then one of the last ultrasounds I had, Dr. Zhang, and he's Chinese, was like, I think she's a girl. I'm 99% sure, and I'm like never wrong. And I'm like,
When you found out that she had this condition, did you already know post delivery that she would have to have any kind of procedures, or can you explain a
yes.
little bit about what you knew you had to do
So,
once that was done?
yes. So once we found out what she had, told me that they recommend I have a C-section because giving vaginal birth could cause complications, being the organs were on the outside of her. And of course, I was like, well, yeah, let's do what's best for her. Um, and then she was going to have surgery right after she was born.
Mhm.
Um, they can, a lot of times, these babies have to have a silo. And so it like holds, like a bag holds the intestines, they seal it because the air actually will attack the intestines and damage them. So
Mm.
they seal it, and gravity naturally pulls it back into their body.
Mm.
But sometimes they're able to get everything back in right away. Um, and thankfully, the doctor, he is one of the best surgeons in the country for these things. So I got lucky there.
Yeah.
So I had to have a planned C-section. And so at 37 weeks, I went back to Omaha and they did an amniocentesis, which is a drawing of the amniotic fluid from a needle. The needle was like, I'm not joking, this long. Um,
Is there a risk by doing that?
yes, it can actually make your water break.
Okay.
But at 37 weeks, they wanted to make sure her lungs were fully developed before they went ahead into the C-section again, because they want to get the baby out as soon as possible, because of the amniotic fluid attacking your organs. So they did that in the morning, and then I got a call saying her lungs were developed. They can go ahead and take her. So that afternoon, I went back to the hospital. They got me all ready for the C-section, and she was born healthy. She weighed 5 pounds, 15 ounces, which is actually really big for a gastroschisis baby. They're usually only 2 to 3 pounds.
Wow,
So
that's wonderful.
that was good for her. And thankfully, the surgeon was able to get all of her organs put back in without the silo. So
Great.
she was sealed up and ready to go. And she was in the NICU for about 6 weeks because she couldn't eat food right away. She actually got fed through a central line, what they put through your heart. It goes directly into your heart. They feed her lipids and all that kind of stuff until she was able to have the milk. So I breast pumped and saved the milk for her.
Good job, Mom.
Yes.
Hero. Not only
Yay.
that, you just had a C-section, so you had major surgery, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I end up getting a really bad infection in the C-section scar, the incision.
So the baby got taken care of, and then tell us what happened with you right afterwards. So the baby came out, and now let's focus on
Okay, so
your.
Chevy came out in the world. They took her back. I got to kiss her goodbye. I got to see her for maybe a minute. Literally, they brought her, I kissed her, they took her. And my mom was there with me. She was in the delivery room. And I was like, Mom, please go be with her. I'll be fine. She needs somebody. And so she did. I got really sick, unfortunately, from the anesthesia and the shock of the C-section. I was puking for most of the day. And so because of that, I wasn't able to actually see her until the next day, like in the afternoon and evening time. So almost 24 hours after giving birth to her, finally got to see her again. But her surgery went well. She got everything back in. She was
So
good.
that was really your focus. Like, she was okay. And
Yes.
then you were kind of like, I know I'm not great, but she's okay.
Yes. Yes.
Do you think that got you through that first day?
Yes. Yes. And they did. The nurses were really well coming in and telling me she's had her surgery. She's doing good. This is what's going on. My mom came and checked on me before she went back to her hotel room and let me know how she was doing and showed me a few pictures. But yeah, maybe I can even share those pictures. We can have Ace put the pictures
I
in
would
the
love that.
screen
He could share
of
that.
her in her silo bag because they had to protect all the organs before they took her back to surgery.
Yeah. I mean, I would actually be very interested in sharing that. So
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you're feeling really lousy. Like, I think most mothers who've had C-sections don't realize you've just had your abdominal wall ripped open, all sorts of things. Like,
Yes.
this is a serious surgery. It's not something you just pick up and be like, let's just do it. Let's go back to our normal life. And you said you got an infection. So tell me a little bit about what went wrong.
It was just a bacterial infection. I was a little on the heavier side, so that could have been a part of it. I couldn't keep it as clean as it could have been, But they just had a packet full of gauze every day.
Mm.
Take it out, pack it full until
How
it
long were you in
healed.
the hospital?
They didn't admit me to the hospital. I went to the ER because I was having some discharge down at the site wound. And they're
Okay.
like, yeah, you have an infection. And they ended up giving me an IV antibiotic. And I'm allergic to all the good antibiotics.
Really? Like,
I
you've known
am.
this? You've known you've been
Yeah.
allergic? Did you tell them
Yes.
hey, I can't?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they know. They knew. And they're like, well, what we have to give you is in the family of what you're allergic to, but we have to do this. And they literally had a nurse sit in with me as I was getting the IV fluids to make sure I didn't go into anaphylactic shock or anything like that. but I didn't. I end up not being allergic to specific antibiotic, thankfully. And that took gosh, I was still having it packed when I got home from the hospital 6 weeks later. So Chevy recovered. She was
Before
fully
you did.
recovered before I did. So, but yeah, she was there for about 6 weeks, and at that time, it was one of the fastest recoveries for gastroschisis that they had there in Omaha.
I wonder if she's in the records of their success stories.
Oh yeah,
Awesome.
I'm sure.
Laura, how do you feel about like what Heather's sharing about that experience? I mean, and your experience maybe with other patients.
The first time I've heard the whole thing. I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
it. I mean, it's so like being worried more about the baby than what you have going on for yourself. Absolutely. Um, but I can hear why there would be a lot of energetic stuff left over. And births like these, actually, you could have a normal, what from the outside looks like a normal birth, and you can have wounds that are related to it that take years and years to really resolve and work through. And when I say birth and becoming a mom is one of the most transformational things that you can do in your life, it's not just labor and delivery. Sometimes you arrive on the other side of that doorway years and years later after you've gone through the healing work that you need to, that resulted from a challenging labor. What I love about this is I think it's easy for Heather to say it wasn't all that bad. I
what do
can
you
see
think?
it. Like the
What
way
do you think, Heather?
the way she talks about it, she's like, it's not, it wasn't that big of a deal. I was more worried about, and it makes sense. Absolutely. It makes sense. But I can only imagine an entire pregnancy holding your breath every time you sit down for an ultrasound once a week and then 3 times a week. This is almost an entire year of your life
The
wondering,
stress that you put on
is my baby
yourself.
gonna be okay?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I had other stressful things,
Yes.
me and her
We always do.
father, weren't together anymore through this whole thing. That
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
that was
I was
on my
going to ask
own.
about who the support was. So was it just your mom?
Yeah, my mom pretty much was my support.
Yeah. Laura, from just your perspective of like if you had a patient that wanted to have, you know, a birth in your center and they had a condition, their daughter had a condition or soon to be child had a condition, how would your approach be?
Well, unfortunately for what was going on with her, they would risk out into OB care.
Yeah.
Like, that's what has to happen. What's great about midwifery care is we can do tandem care up until labor and delivery. Um, so there's all sorts of little things like that. I'm so blessed to be in Washington and Idaho, where we have some of the most generous midwifery laws in the entire country. So we do more than most other states do in the United States. There's just circumstances that we can't get around that are just too high risk, that need more monitoring. And the reassurance that I would, if Heather came, like she's my friend, so like we just totally like we're casually talking,
Yeah.
but I talk to everyone about their birth. Like it's just like my default, right? But if someone like her came in, I would first look at them and say, you did nothing to cause this to happen. You did nothing. There was nothing wrong with how you treated your body. There's nothing wrong with you, genetic thing or not. You did nothing wrong. There is no way you could have controlled this into being a particular way,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Right. And then the next thing because the next thing they go is, man, I wish I hadn't had a C-section. Because most women who want to have another baby at some point, they go, man, I wish I hadn't had a C-section. And I go, well, of all the people who had a necessary C-section, you are the one.
Mhm.
Like I
Yeah.
work in midwifery, we bemoan the C-section rate in the United States. It's hovering around 35%. It's awful.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Well, and it's easy because the doctors want to put it on their schedule because this
Yeah.
is, convenient. Now, my
Yeah.
question to you for someone like Heather who's had a C-section, a lot of times they say once a C-section, now you're just in that cycle of having your next child. How do you approach that? I mean, some moms and other people still believe, well, it's probably just best to just do that again. What's your feedback on that?
Well, VBACs are incredibly common in our practice. So that's a vaginal birth after cesarean. And this is all about the risk tolerance of the mom and the midwife. So they are higher risk births. If you do a VBAC in a hospital, they require an OR on staff
Mhm.
because you could rupture and bleed out very, very quickly.
And is that because of how things were repaired? Like, why is that the case?
Yeah, so I'll be very clear here. I believe, just me, not
Yeah.
the representation of the clinic that I'm part of. But like in general, the reason why VBACs are so common where we're at is because all the statistics about how dangerous they are based off when we were repairing C-sections in a completely different way than we are now.
Mm,
So they used to not very properly suture women back up.
okay,
And that led to a bad scar that, yes, would lead more likely to a rupture.
gotcha.
Like, the statistics were way too high, and so the statistics that we base off of safety, are based off of that era.
Mhm, mhm.
We redid all this, we would realize actually it's incredibly safe
Yeah,
because the people who have had cesareans now, especially planned cesareans, they are sutured beautifully. Um, Not so much externally, like, I would say we got some work there. Like, that last layer on the skin can be pretty tough for women, but the suturing of the uterus and all of that that happens is actually, um, very technical and has improved vastly, and so it allows the scar that does form to not rupture when you're in labor. And then the other thing that we do for safety reasons is we watch where the umbilical cord has implanted in the placenta. And we can actually say, okay, legitimately, this is a low risk VBAC because of how everything is placed. And if it is not placed in a ideal way, like it's placed on the scar, then we go, this is high risk. You probably need to, yes, try a vaginal birth, but do it in the hospital,
mhm.
not at home.
And you could still have a midwife and that support there too, right?
If those services are available to you, they're not in every state,
Yeah,
and, like, people have to drive in my area 2 hours for that option, which is
gotcha.
why most people opt for a home birth.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I really appreciate that because I'm not, as familiar, I'm one out of, okay, so I have a lot of sister-in-laws. My husband had 5 sisters, and then my husband's brother is married, and they all had a C-section, all of
yeah.
them. Yeah, I'm the only one that had except for my one sister had twins. The first one was vaginal, and then the second one was stuck and had to have an emergency C-section. So
Mm,
I could appreciate, they did once they had the first C-section, they just went right into the second one. And I mean, rightfully so, except for my sister-in-law wanted to have a VBAC, but I think it just didn't end up working out. And so had the C-section. So thank you for at least sharing how it's improved. That's like reassuring. And for anyone who else wants to continue the journey again, to
yeah.
at least give that option a try.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, you're fighting the system when you make that decision,
I know. Oh,
right?
yeah. Well, I think this is
Perfectly
why
right.
we're talking. This is why we
Yeah.
have these conversations. I think if people are at this point where they're listening here, I mean, for me personally, I know that I'm looking for options to step away from an old system that no longer services me. And so maybe others are feeling that way. I'm assuming you guys, obviously, Laura, you shared how much you kind of recreated this wheel for what, about 18 years now. And Heather, you sharing your stories. I mean, I don't know next time, if there's gonna be a next time, what would that look like for you? How would you wanna
Um,
approach things?
if I am fortunate enough to have another child, I would definitely look into VBAC as my first choice. And I would love to give birth in a water with dolphins.
Oh my gosh,
That would be my ultimate dream.
that would be amazing.
Yes.
I would just like to be in water with dolphins in general.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So I love the story. I mean, in the sense of like, how you were able to literally, honestly, remember the details, like, and how here you are now. And Laura, you guys obviously have talked about this pregnancy and this delivery. And
Yeah.
so tell us how this awesome conversation started with the Chinese medicine and some things that you guys have worked on.
Yeah. So I, as usual, was kind of doing spiritual talk with Heather going. And I do this work. I'm trying on this modality called resonant attention, where you kind of feel into people's field, basically. And this is something I've been doing for years and years and years, but didn't really understand that I was doing it. As I've developed kind of the awareness of it, it's come on more. But it's common when I talk to all women who've had a baby, there's usually something going on when I feel into them around their belly. Especially if you've had a C-section, an early C-section, it will feel like energetically that you're still pregnant.
So did you feel that just naturally talking with Heather, or did you just start being like, "Hey, let's have this like
No,
conversation"?
it totally I like, halfway through, I went, "Oh, Heather, I just tapped into and I'm so sorry. Do I have your permission?"
And Heather's like, "I felt you." No.
No, I actually don't feel
I
that,
know.
but
You actually said that you didn't feel it. So that we'll talk about that too.
I've always felt bloated, right? I always feel bloated, and I didn't really know why. Um,
And there's lots of like Chinese medicine reasons why women feel that way. And like, this is the most common thing. There's a channel called the Dai Mai. It's called the girdle vessel. And it's the one that stretches the most in pregnancy. But like, okay, so the medicine I practice is physical, but it's even more importantly, spiritual, mental, emotional. So this is the same idea that if you, in Chinese medicine, if you have your gallbladder removed, it's just the physical organ that's gone. Everything else is still there. So the
And you
physical
still have
organ
those like effects, even with it
exactly.
being gone. Right.
So the physical organ is not that big of a deal. And when you have a birth that you have not fully processed on that spiritual, energetic level, of course the pregnancy is still there.
So
So
how common would you say this is for mothers?
any difficult birth they've ever gone through that they didn't fully process, it's there.
Mm.
Like, typically, the first thing that I feel is that.
Can I
Um
ask a question?
Mhm.
Can someone that had a first birth that was a little bit traumatic, just based on maybe the environment itself, and then had a second child, does that pass through energetically, or does it build up energy? Are you
Sometimes it does. It just depends. It just depends on the person, and
Mhm,
the work that they've done, and I think for a lot of women, yes, that second birth is incredibly cathartic.
mm,
Um, I think that in our culture, we have a lot of hard time trusting our bodies.
mhm,
And so the second time around, because you've done it before, it's a lot easier to trust your body. And so unknowingly, you rebuild this trust, right? So I'll just say from my experience, I've only had one child. And God, I hope on the next one that it's a lot shorter of a labor because I was in labor for 39 hours or so. We always joke that the birth workers are gonna have either the butter birth, the super easy one, or we're just gonna bring it and have all the things,
yeah,
right?
yep.
So, I think that for me, I'll say for me, I didn't trust my body, and I did not resolve that lack of trust in that birth. I know that. right? So me being dedicated to spiritual work, I'm very aware of this, right? But most of us aren't. Most of us aren't. But I think that this is the power of birth is that second labor, your body's like, oh, I know how this works. And so, yes, you can resolve that trauma from the first one.
So
Definitely.
awesome. So with you and Heather, how long did this process take when you guys worked together?
Um, I think as it was informal, Heather, I kind of like stuck it in your hands. I said, you know what to
Yeah.
do. Didn't
Yeah.
I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I do a lot of energy work too.
So what did you do, Heather?
So, me and Ace got into a meditation, and he also is an energy healer. And he put his hands on my stomach, and we envisioned and commanded to release the energetic pregnancy, and we did. And you still have to process it out, right? So I asked to urinate it out, and I did. And I lost 6 pounds in a week from
Fascinating.
doing this. And I also had what I call a permanent pregnancy belly. So it always looked like I was pregnant still up at the top. And now that has started to really recede.
Wow. Do you have a before and after picture?
Um, I I have one at my heaviest, and I can show one. I can take one now.
Okay. Maybe that'd be something if you feel comfortable sharing,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? But that's amazing. Like, so, and how does the bloaty feeling, is that still there or is it
No, not as
less?
much. Not as much. Not as much.
That's
I
wonderful.
so it was amazing to go through this process and see the weight loss and all
You've
that
had
stuff
quite
with
the
it.
journey, my friend.
I have.
I'm so proud of you. So
Thank
proud of
you.
both of you guys that you guys found each other. And that's what this is all about, right? Is coming together with our friends and community and, you know, having the gifts that we have to service one another. So that's so beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
Yes. Is there anything else you guys want to share?
I just think it's so powerful that you did it yourself, honestly. I just pointed it out. You know what I mean? And I think that the only reason why is because I've seen it so many times. And you did it yourself. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yes.
I love
I,
that.
I'm all about healing. So
Yeah.
that's been my primary focus for about 3 years now.
Yeah,
Did you
that's
end up
another story that we're going to get down to at some point because you've
Yes.
had a, it's, there's a lot of stories I think that we
I
can
have a
get
lot of stories.
into. But you've come a long way. Would you say, I mean, just as a brief topic, I mean, we talked a little bit about awakening and this whole pilot of what the broadcast is, and that some of us may have had an awakening, some of us may have always had a knowing. When would you say if you had an awakening, how long that was? How long ago?
um, I've kind of always been aware, psychic, um, but I really started getting back into it in 2020. I really dove 2019 to 2020. I really started diving into spirituality,
Mhm.
and I ended up getting my Reiki license and started doing energy healing through that. And it just then I met Ace, and that's a whole nother story.
That
But
is a whole nother story, which I am seriously going to reconnect with you on that one for sure.
yes,
That's just a fascinating story. I mean, we all kind of know each other through Ace. When we come down to it, it's beautiful. How about you, Laura? Would you like to share a little bit about your knowing of just your journey? Anything that you might want to wrap up on just where you are now?
I think I've always had knowing. I think we've talked about this where I was like, I can't point to some massive crazy thing where I was like, I'm awakened. But, I've spent my entire life seeing fairies and seeing things and knowing things, which I think gets suppressed as you grow up and then you go back and forth in it. But I did say to someone the other day, um, and I love this. I love this about life. I love this about life is, for me, the goal is to simply exist, to show up, to say, I am, you are, and be in love, right? But the beauty of journeying through life on a linear time scale is this idea of, I thought I knew myself. And then this happened. And now I know myself. And I'm so excited for the next thing where I get to know even more.
Right.
Yeah.
I can totally agree with you. Like, I really knew nothing. I still don't know anything, but it's like my mind has been expanded to something that I didn't even know about. And it's like I'm in this whole other world, and I could see the duality. And there's this other world where it's like, it's so interesting to be able to kind of be living on both, like just like you said, even with your practice, you still have to kind of teeter totter on this, like, you know, parallel reality of like what the consciousness is over here and where the consciousness is over there. So it's quite fascinating though. I'm always more when you kind of look at on a broader lens, it doesn't feel as bad. It's not so heavy. So I try to come from that perspective, and that's how we can look at these stories after like the traumas happen. We can kind of look at it from um, an overview and see how, here we are 13 years later, healthy daughter, your life is improving, you've expanded yourself, and we've met like-minded friends to be able to share this story. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
So can you guys share a little bit about where maybe people might want to connect with you before we wrap up? Laura, why don't you start off like where they could find you if they want to know anything about the Chinese medicine or the birthing center? Maybe they're in Washington state, or where they could connect with you.
So you can connect with me at laurarosegage.com, and that will connect to all of my projects. I have many. And you can follow me on Instagram if you want at homestead.maven.
I love that. Homestead. I want to come to the homestead. We will. I will be coming.
Early and milk goats, and it will be great.
Oh, yes. And how about you, Heather? Any way that you would like anyone to connect with you?
We have a YouTube channel, Stu, Essential Energetics. We have an email, heal.essentialenergetics.com. We also have a website, essentialenergetics.com. You can find me on Facebook, Heather Mavigliano. So that's about the only places that I could think at the top of my head.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I thank you again for joining us on our first episode with the Conscious Broadcast. And again, please like, subscribe, and then we hope to hear from you. Maybe join on one of our next episodes. Thanks so much. Have a good night.